All right, you guys, we are back with Madeline from Leaving Babylon on YouTube. Yay. You guys know her from our show if you've been listening for a while. We've been talking about old world history, Tartaria, some people call it. We've talked a lot about energy and made some connections with the Bible and things like that. We know that you guys have been really enjoying all of these episodes. We've gotten lots of positive feedback, so we always love having Madeline on. Madeline, we're noticing that you're dropping a lot of really, really interesting information on YouTube. And for those that aren't, following or listening, what are some of the things that you're going over, and how are people receiving all of that?
Well, it's been going really well. And thank you to you both for encouraging me to have some kind of presence somewhere. So I went to YouTube, and because this is such a visual topic, not this one specifically, tonight we're going to be talking about energy, but the whole sort of topics I cover, I like to give real visual backing to. So whether that be articles or reports, things that people have done investigations on, and it's usually around the old world, and specifically around what we would call, probably Tartaria would be the hashtag, but more like the millennial reign of Christ, which was the medieval age, and some of the related Revelation 20 events that go along with that. So the loosing of Satan is a big theme, but also things like technocratic takeovers is one of the playlists, and another one is the sides of the north. So that's like biblical cosmology related to all of those topics. So it's kind of like a big basket of goodies.
Yes, a little bit of everything.
Yeah, it's really, really good. You're doing such a great job, and I hope that people are listening. I know that you have a lot of followers on there, a very engaged audience, so that's awesome, and I hope it continues to grow. But for tonight, we're going to continue in our discussion about old world energy, and you've brought some slides and some things that you want to share with the audience, and so we're just going to let you jump right in, and we'll comment as needed.
Sure. Thank you so much. I think it's fun to recap kind of things that we've talked about before. So obviously without too much depth or, I hope people have heard the previous ones we've done on this on your channel, because those are probably the fun ones. Like they lead up to this, right? So, and this will just add on to that. So if anyone hasn't heard those, they should go listen to that.
Yeah, for sure.
But I think just initially, so just to recap, we've talked about ether. We've talked about all of the different elements, the basic classical elements, and those sort of are where the energy, so this topic of free energy, which is bandied about a lot, but not many people have the time, for one thing, to delve too much into it, because it is a huge topic. And so we've mostly talked about free energy, I would say, and kind of the concepts around that, like atmospheric energy, electrostatic energy in the air, and how people capture that, and how they used to capture that in the old architecture. And it's really neat to look at old pictures of that. So if you do like the hashtag of Tartarian architecture, for example, you would find a lot of examples of buildings with very high spires on them, and those would give you an idea of, well, how high some of the spires were actually going at the time. We don't see a lot of that anymore, so there's mystery as well. Like why don't we have those kind of buildings anymore? And these are just some of the questions that I think we tend to deal with when we try to grapple with when we talk about this. So that I find that fun, and I think a lot of people do find it fun, because when you start looking at the old pictures, you will actually see that there's a lot of quite mind-blowing examples of what the luminous sort of really bright lights of the old world. We tend to think of the old world as being very dark, right? Because they call it the Dark Ages, right? So you get programmed to think of things like this. But one of the big names, as everyone knows now, and we talked about him a little bit before, is Nikola Tesla. So I'm just going to try and start sharing some pictures. Oh, where did it go? Bear with me a second.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is just an example of Tesla's, some of the quotes that you might find on him. Electric power is everywhere, present in unlimited quantities, and can drive the world's machinery without the need of coal, oil, gas, or any other of the common fuels. And this is one of the oscillation towers that were designed by him. And, that was just harnessing really the atmospheric energy and also delivery systems of that energy. So it's a fascinating thing because you don't see these things around anymore, really.
I think the closest thing you see would be like a cell phone tower, which some of them look sort of similar, but
right.
Yeah.
And doesn't it go down? Doesn't this particular model go down into the ground quite a ways? There's a component of it, that center component, that goes down into the ground. I've seen.
Yeah. Well, what he knew and what we now are realizing as more people look into this is that the Earth has energy and the air has energy. So the Earth is positively charged and the air is negatively charged. So the electrostatic energy combined with the ether, and these kind of present this mechanism of delivery for that. So it's like an excitation. And I think the higher up you go, the more atmospheric energy you actually collect. So
sure.
Yeah.
Wow, that's fascinating.
And they ripped these down on purpose.
Sorry?
Didn't they rip these down on purpose?
Yeah, and we've talked about that a little bit, where the people. So this all ties into the whole reset of what was like reset from the Dark Ages to the so-called Enlightenment, and we saw a lot of these what I would call technocrats. They saw an opportunity, and actually, there's books written about robber barons. So that could be a name we use for them as well. There was a time where there was this shift of power, and I think a lot of people in that group knew that this was coming. They were preparing, whether over the generations of their families, however that shook down. There was kind of a knowledge, it seems, that they knew this shift would actually happen, and so they kind of prepared for it, and they took advantage of the opportunity, basically, with this absence of what I think were people who had been there before, and people who I believe were sort of remnants of the millennial reign, or people who had been there during the millennial reign were now absent. And so there was just this vacuum of enormous amounts of opportunity. And it seems like they were very organized with it as well. So we also see a lot of the burning down of cities, and we saw that. And there has been a constant, continuous destruction of the old technology. And I don't know if you notice in your town, but I'm almost seeing it on an increasing level, where the older buildings will suddenly have plastic wrap all around them. And then
we just saw this. They just did this to the old Nike building.
Yeah, there's several in this city here, and so you look at it before all this goes on, and it seems like they let them run into ruin a little bit. So they let them go derelict. Probably the rent is too high because they're in pretty nice neighborhoods, right? And the way the economy's gone, businesses can't really afford those rising rents. So then it just stays empty, and then runs into ruin, and then they use the excuse of having to go in and modernize it and improve it, and at the same time it seems like they're actually removing a lot of the old world features, whatever those might be.
Interesting.
And so there was like these tall spires, and I think that's just something that I want to share a little bit more about, because you think, well, why is a tall spire anything important, or how does that actually work, right? So I'll just share, first of all, I want to share with you a picture of atmospheric energy, and just kind of the different layers of how those look. And it's called the ionosphere scientifically. So you would have your very strongest layers of ionosphere the higher up you go.
Okay.
And as you come down, so you can see why these buildings had to be so tall, because these spires here are actually collecting electrostatic energy. And then we'll see the structure of these actually. If I go to the next picture, can you see this one? This next one? Okay, good. So I can just go through them. So these really ornate spires.
Yeah, those are beautiful.
Beautiful, right? And that's what I love about the old world architecture, is things were so beautiful.
Yep.
Not like we see now, where everything is
like
made as cheap as possible.
Yeah, we all live in cubes now.
Yeah. And very basic construction materials too, right? But you'll see at the top, like they have quite like delicate metal work. And that would be kind of like a copper and sort of really thin and light as you go up and up and up. And the reason for that is because the more little strands you have, and if they're moving, so like a weather vane, for example, when the wind kind of just jiggles it a little bit, it actually creates like resonance, right? So it sort of spins itself. And they will actually, a lot of these have coils beneath them, and they'll be spinning. So they might be like a copper coil that is inserted into the spindle at the top with a spire. And I'll get to, so these old buildings are just gorgeous.
They are so beautiful.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating how they just don't have that type of architecture anymore. Like nobody's doing this.
No.
And you have to wonder why, why is it? I mean, obviously it would take a little more work and a little more craftsmanship to make it happen. But, there's people that have money that would want to do something like that, and just nobody's doing it. It's not really a thing. But everybody was doing it back then. It was almost the standard.
And it's so intricate that it makes you think there has to be another purpose for this. This can't just be for decoration. That's always bothered me.
Yeah.
Like,
and it's like they replaced functional with beauty, but back then it's like they could maintain both,
Right.
Yeah. And I think that's how God created nature, actually, because everything in nature almost has a functional purpose, but it also is beautiful.
Yeah.
Yep. Totally.
Yeah. And I think that speaks to the designer of these buildings being of God's, whether it was the people that lived then or whether it was God himself.
Right.
The design is just phenomenal. So this is just kind of the construction components. So you'd have copper at the top, and then you'd have a portion of it. So this would hold mercury in it. And then you would have a harmonizer, a resonator, frequency would come up through here. And assumably there would be a storage container or, storage unit there. And I mean, these are highly complex designs, like we can't even put two blocks on one another and wire something through it, let alone the extent of this building, this construction. And then, and then these are called star forts. So, when we're talking about all the types of architecture that we can see all over the world, if any of your listeners haven't looked at the star forts yet, I think there's a lot of good visuals online. This one is in northern Canada. And that really surprised me. I don't know why, but it's in the Arctic area. Yeah. So it's in northern Manitoba, near Churchill, if anyone's looking for it. I think it's called the Prince of Wales Fort. And again, I think when we're in this genre of interest, there's a lot of stories that they use to kind of cover the truth. But you have to just use your sense of logic, right? You have to say, okay,
right.
hear in all the history stories that people were on horseback, they were walking for days to get anywhere. They didn't have a power tool yet.
Mm-hmm.
And
Right.
yet somehow all these geometric pattern or all these geometric designs were perfectly constructed without any kind of,
and they didn't have a drone that they could fly up and be like, okay, we gotta bump this wall out a little bit. Like how did they build them so perfectly? It's crazy.
Yeah. And they had to have had, I mean, I don't think anyone knows because it's been so hidden, but they had to have had tools that could lift heavy loads and transport things. And
yeah, there's been lots of speculation that there is, a device that they have used today, recently that can use frequency and vibration to lift very heavy objects, basically just overcoming the frequency and the vibration of the surrounding area. You can basically lift really large objects.
Well, that was what they suspected. I don't remember if it was our World's Fair episode or whatever, but we talked about the little weird dolls on Easter Island. And there was no evidence that they were moved or scraped along the ground or whatever, but the quarry was all the way on the other side of the island. And somehow these weird, doll heads, what they thought were just the heads, somehow ended up over there. And now they've since dug into the ground and realized their whole bodies.
Yeah.
Like it's not, you see the pictures of the heads all the time, but their whole bodies in there. And there's no evidence that they were moved by any type of primitive tool.
Yeah, I mean, if you know how to harness, frequency and vibration, and you know how to work with that correctly, it is possible. If you do the physics, it is possible. And there's not a lot of that we know about that type of physics because we don't get to learn that type of stuff in school, right? They don't really talk to us about frequency and vibration that much. And so,
but on Back to the Future, I'm just saying he had a hoverboard, and it seemed like it was working well.
Yeah, I think they figured it out.
So, can we get Doc Brown
Somebody knows.
on the case?
That's right.
Exactly. Yeah, and just on the education piece as well, I think it's something that you learn as you go, but the people who are in control, who have all of the libraries with all of this information, and their kids go to the schools where they learn this information, they are called the adept. And we are called profane. We're the ones who get all the garbage knowledge, and they get the adept knowledge.
Right.
Not saying I want that knowledge, because that would also be probably considered occult knowledge. But, I think there's just that difference in what you learn as you grow up, depending on maybe your bloodline.
There's
or whatever.
people that know this stuff. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And honestly, I think they're using a lot of this energy already. I mean, if you look at the power grids, the electrical grids with all the big pylons, I think they're actually collecting atmospheric energy on those.
Oh, wow. I never thought of that.
I think it's right in there.
I would imagine. I mean, they're not going to, if I'm an elite, I'm not going to be paying for my electricity if I know about this. Obviously they know that you can get free energy.
And then they charge us for the free energy.
Yeah. Right. I mean, that was the whole thing with Edison and taking all of Tesla's energy ideas out. And Edison came in with all of these other ideas. And those were the ideas that got promoted, right? The ones that cost money and put us in slavery. So that's interesting.
Yep, exactly. And I think one of the big concepts we have to, if you want to understand how the energy, like the atmospheric energy works, and why things like those electrical pylons would actually be collecting atmospheric electricity, right, is because we live in an enclosed system. And that's just the basic premise of all of this, is that because we live in an enclosed system, and because there is this kind of power differential as you go up and you come down, that is actually what produces gravity. Well, gravity is kind of a profane word for what they know it is, which is actually just atmospheric energy. And it controls, through density, how you stick to the earth or not.
Yep.
You know, some things float up, other things stay down. So it's that combination of density and electrostatic. But yeah, and so it all makes sense when you realize you're actually in an enclosed realm, right?
It actually makes a lot more sense than
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's so sad that you have to convince somebody that we live in a closed system,
Right.
because that lie has been perpetuated so largely over, the whole population, that, you can't even get to this conversation that we're having without going through all of that conversation, all of the biblical cosmology and all of that stuff, which is, it's very difficult to convince somebody that we live in a closed system now. But the basics of it is very simple. You can't have, just like as an example, a gas. You can't have a gas, which air is a gas. You can't have it without having a closed system.
That's
it
right.
would dissipate into the vacuum that is space, or supposed vacuum that is space. And so that right there is a very simple system to show people that, like, listen, guys, this is the reason that we believe that it's a closed system. We would not have all of this oxygen. It just wouldn't be possible. And that's,
Exactly.
you wouldn't have any vapor.
yeah, it's simple physics. It just is. And then when you get into all of the timing of the moon and the timing of the sun and how everything works like a clock and all of these things, it just becomes apparent that we live in a closed system, and it's been completely designed. And that energy that comes from, the atmosphere is there for us, obviously, because if the design is there from a loving creator, which we've all surmised, or those that are willing to believe it, have surmised, that means that all of this was done for us, which means this energy is for us, which means if we don't have access to it and it hasn't been taught to us, something's fishy, right? Somebody's trying to keep this information from us. And we have to ask ourselves why, why are they doing that? And how have they done it? And that, I think that we've built a pretty good case over these last several episodes that we've done.
Yeah.
And we're going to continue to do so. These buildings that you're showing right now are intricate. They're specialized. This is something that would have had to been done by master craftsmen.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. So
Wow.
tell me how in the so-called Dark Ages you would have this such beautiful, ornate. When they told us, actually, it's such a contradiction, because they tell you that people weren't even educated.
Right. They make it seem like they were so primitive.
Yeah. And yet these things were being built, and
Wow.
like these are gold. This is actually gold, because gold is a great conductor of atmospheric energy.
And all of those panels are exactly, perfectly the same size.
Yeah.
How?
Yeah.
And so,
Fascinating.
yeah. So you have these, these lovely antennae at the top, which I think for a long time, most of us just thought, well, isn't that pretty?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. But you didn't stop to think, like, okay, if they were so poor and they were so uneducated and they were just starving and, enduring plagues and being harassed by the difficulty of life, how on earth would they have had the time or energy or wealth to build these?
And how would they back then have protected it from, like, a thief? If people were so primitive, they see these gold structures, you think they're not going to try to take them?
Yeah. Right. I mean, they look
really pretty.
So we couldn't even afford to build these right now.
Right. Wow.
Yeah. And these are all built for frequency, right? Resonant frequency, vibration.
Yeah, makes sense.
I like this one. My belief is that the way that society was structured, and being the millennial brain when these were built, I honestly believe that God was very connected to his people. And so when they would go in, they would worship. It was like a place of healing. We've talked about that before. But you would this was like your central source of power, where God lives in us. So it's not like he's living in the building, but
right.
When you harness the energy of the atmosphere, I think there's probably a special kind of download or restoration, maybe like to your physical body, maybe to your spirit, that you would experience going into these places.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That makes sense.
Yeah, gigantic healing centers. It's funny. You said, these buildings were built in the millennial kingdom, and it just brought that verse to my mind where Jesus says, I go to prepare a place for you. And, it's interesting because it's like, where did he go to prepare that place?
Right.
He doesn't say he goes, technically, he doesn't say that he goes to heaven to prepare that place.
Yeah.
He says he goes to prepare a place. And so it just makes me wonder that, because some people have seen that episode that we did where we talked about the clock and how things are moving and things are revealed and land is revealed, and whatever people think about that. It is interesting to think that maybe this stuff was revealed as, as Christ went and prepared it for us. Maybe he's the one that was able to do all of this, because this is incredible. I mean, you look at this is incredible to think that, Christ could come in and just make all of these for us. That actually isn't that far off in my mind, that he would be able to do that. And that would be something that he would do, make these giant healing centers, these giant places where people can gather and learn and grow together as in harmony. It just makes sense to me.
Yeah, totally.
And I think the way that we have talked about this before, but the way that everything moved in its frequency. So once all of that was over and the new reset had happened, and, these people, robber barons, whatever you want to call them, technocratic elites had taken over, they reset things like frequency, so now the music you hear is no longer in that old world frequency, which was closer to the natural harmonic frequencies, resonant frequencies that God had designed this whole world to kind of to glorify him with, and to be fruitful and all of these things, and to be healthy and strong. But they started using frequency against us, didn't they? Like that, I think you mentioned last time, Rick, the weapon sort of.
Yeah, they weaponized it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of these, most of the old churches, most of the old cathedrals would have had the bells in them. They would have been creating more than just, say, a choral, vocal frequency. There would have been a lot of instruments, right? So I think just in my mind as well, and I don't know how this can be proved, because most people don't use cathedrals anymore. They're often just turned into something else. I know they're turning a lot of them into apartments and things like that, or and they're kind of taking all of these special features off of them. And we've seen the one in Paris, Notre Dame, get burned.
Oh, right.
Which I think was probably intentional. I don't see how that could have just burned on its own.
Right.
But, the acoustics, I think the acoustics actually played a huge part in it to actually power the neighborhoods or the areas that they were located in. So imagine that the way that your building is built here. So you've got all these really sensitive antennas around it. And then you have people in there, or you have the bells ringing. And then you have this really like sort of building harmonic vibration, like the frequency going up and up and up. And it's exciting the air around it, because these are metallic, gathering and exciting sort of. And so the mercury is where that comes in, actually. So mercury is very reactive. So when it gets into an electrified environment, it's extremely active, and that's why they used because it would cause that sort of oscillation effect, right? So. And it's a naturally occurring element. Like,
right.
It's not some, it's something God made. And so I would have loved to see how these were built. I don't know about you.
I know. Yeah. Oh my goodness.
It makes you just want to stand inside one of them in its original form and just, just
feel it.
Feel it. Yeah. Just feel what that would feel like and how that would, what that would be like for your body and for your mood and all of those different things. It's really interesting.
I mean, even something as simple as that, like red light therapy that you can go do. We sat, Rick got it for free because he was with me.
You're dang right.
He got to sit in the room with me while I got the red light therapy a couple of times with that, like an IV hydration vitamin pack. And we were just like, this feels amazing. Just sitting there in front of that red light for a half an hour was, I don't know. It was just something, you felt different.
Yeah.
It's so crazy.
I believe that. Yeah. I've done those, not the same with light, but I've done the, the pods that you can float in, like a flotation tank.
Oh yeah. What is that?
It's like a starvation tank, or not that, but
sensory deprivation. Sensory starvation tank.
Yeah. And honestly, it's so healing. Like it sort of, and then they have all of the, the special minerals in the water and everything. Mm-hmm. So you're kind of soaking all of that up, but
I've always wanted to do one of those. Yeah. And then also at the same time, not. I imagine myself having a bit of a panic attack in there.
It's actually okay. They're bigger than you think on the inside. Like,
yeah, that's what I've heard. They're actually really relaxing. I'm like, okay.
They are. Yeah. Yeah. So, there was a lot of gold. I mean, again, it just speaks to the wealth of that time. And I don't see that time as being like a really, dog eat dog, kind of like what we have now, where everybody's just out for themselves. And this actually speaks to me of coordination, community working together, or, people just being there for the good of the whole, not just, not just working for oneself to become better than your neighbor.
Right. That sense of community, because you can't, you construct something like this without a large amount of unity and different trades working together.
Yeah, exactly. And again, that's why I just don't think money was even a thing. I think, I think they were doing these things because they had access to everything. There was no question about if they wanted to go build a beautiful building, they could just organize and go do it,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah, and have all of that gold that would be needed to do that is incredible. That's an incredible amount of gold.
I know. Yeah. I was just gonna say, do you think they mined for that gold somewhere around these buildings, or like were they shipping this stuff? Like what?
I wonder if it just came from heaven.
That's true. I mean, it seems like.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty incredible. There's a lot of people that have never even seen. That's why I'm glad you're putting up these pictures, because there's a lot of people that have never even seen these images and allowed it to do to them what it should, which is inspire awe. Like
what
make them feel happening
something
here? Yeah, because this is not normal construction, right? And we're not used to seeing this type of stuff, but it was pretty prevalent for the world for a short time.
Yeah. And you'll even notice the bricks here underneath these little spires.
Yeah, I was looking at that.
Yeah. And brick was used massively back then. So there's a theory that because it has iron in it, that it was actually used to store some of the atmospheric energy. And so if your whole building is made of brick, and it's actually storing the energy, then you've almost got an endless supply of electricity in your house.
Well, even now, what was that show? Dual Survival or something? The one guy that never wore any shoes anywhere. So he built a house in like Arizona, and he uses like bricks. So they heat up during the day, and then he'll bring them in, and it keeps, his space warm at night because they do retain some of that energy.
That's right. Yeah. And I mean, when you just look at the scale of these buildings as well, like the geometry is perfect.
Yeah.
And
perfect on every side.
Yeah. It just doesn't match the narrative, does it? And then
Yeah.
the beauty of it is just intense.
And the color in that one, that blue color, it's just, it makes you think there has to be a reason for it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really like the Russian sort of onion domes.
Yeah.
And it's interesting
cool
as well how each area of the world just had its own kind of flavor of the same thing. So if you go to England, they're all kind of these like really pointy or sort of square type things. But then you go to Russia and it's all this beautiful, like rounded stuff.
Kind of curvy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and all of the Oriental areas have their own kind of style
like the
too.
pagoda style or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and there's just more there, and again, it's just so beautiful. But so yeah, I think just in terms of the the metals that were being used, we talked about gold, we talked about mercury, we talked about copper, and all of these things conduct, and then you would have these domes where all of your frequency would collect, right? So I think just the beautiful mechanics of it is really something to call out. And even just the regular buildings, like these beautiful buildings in every city. We don't see that anymore.
Nope.
Taking the tops off of that. I really like the flying machines or airships.
Oh, that's cool again.
And those have largely went away. We don't really see blimps anymore. I mean, we have the Goodyear blimp that usually goes around during football games and stuff, but that's really it when it comes to blimps. We don't really see those anymore.
They did an episode on Silver Pilled podcast where they talked about airboats, because back in the day, what else would these people have called them? Of course, they looked like a boat and they were in the air, so you're going to call it an airboat.
Sure.
Yeah. And I think they were, from pictures I've seen, they loaded people up in here so people could actually get in at the top here. And they carried quite a few people. I think the captain sits under here. So there's like a little box at the bottom underneath. Okay. And they had restaurants. They had cabins for sleeping in them. They had viewing decks. And then, so these things here, these towers are kind of like power towers, and I think they sort of replenished their fuel, whatever they were using for fuel, so probably some kind of gas. And I also think that they harnessed the atmospheric electricity as well. Just to keep them flying. Yeah.
Yeah, those things are fascinating.
That's a crazy picture.
And they're huge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're massive, but they're lighter than air, right? So that's, it's amazing that this structure actually stayed up in the air.
No kidding.
Well, in this picture right here, I mean, it just goes to show you that gravity is, it's not a thing. Because if gravity was a thing, then, being just a little bit lighter than air is, that just the fact that a balloon can fly in the air, when you have gravity holding down millions of gallons of ocean, it's like, okay, where's the inconsistency here? Because you have this airship that's just, hovering here because it's less buoyant than the air around it, right? That's buoyancy. And so when you think about that, when it comes to gravity, like this should not be happening.
Yeah.
Especially when you start putting bodies in there, putting human beings in there, because we're not lighter than air.
No, exactly. So they were really lighter than air, like.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think because our modern, I don't even like that word anymore, modern, because I feel like we're so way behind where we should be. But our minds are so used to seeing airplanes in the air, which are super heavy. And so it's hard to even imagine like that. But I think as well, lighthouses were used for the same purpose.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Yeah, like I think you could get almost anywhere. You didn't need a landing pad, like a landing strip, like you do at an airport. I think you could just embark and disembark.
Okay.
Now, this one isn't connected to any land, but you know what I mean?
Right.
If you were just on the edge of a cliff or whatever, you could still get to that area.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm picking up what you're putting down.
Yeah, I mean, it looks a lot like those
Right?
those things that they were connecting to.
Interesting.
Yeah, and if you think these things were probably just flying around everywhere, they wouldn't have been always flying near a city. They might have been just free to wander, like
Right.
less rules, and so maybe they just flew along the coast and people were just like viewing the beautiful coastline, and then they could pull up here and get out and have a little walk around.
Huh.
That's interesting.
It's kind of cool to think of that.
Yeah.
Really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting to speculate on how this world would have worked, because you clearly have all of this evidence that things were different, right? And there is a lot of speculation that goes on about, what it might have been like, but the technology and the supposed freedom that you see these people having, especially freedom to travel. We've talked about trains, we've talked about flight, we've talked about all kinds of different things, but it's not like the normal stuff that we have today, which is very, like you said, heavy, cost effective, or not cost efficient. There's all of these different, it has to be propelled through the air in order for it to stay afloat, all of those different things. This thing wouldn't have to be propelled in order to stay afloat. It's so much more cost effective and leisurely. It seemed like nobody really had anywhere to go in a hurry. Nobody was there are no bullet trains or anything like that. Nobody's in a hurry to go.
They weren't on the 9-to-5 schedule.
Everybody was kind of leisurely going about the world, it seems like. And so you can kind of pick up this difference in life.
Like we're the hamster wheel that we're in now.
Yeah, just almost like it didn't exist at this time.
Well, that's when you're in a slave culture, is when you literally have to work to survive. Because, not saying I don't like work, but it's that sort of work that you don't really want to be going to do. There's nothing and it's taking you away from family or from the things that are truly meaningful.
Even if you love your job, you still have things at home that you would rather stay home and do.
Yeah,
you'd rather work in the home and get that stuff done. Yeah.
And our culture shows that it's struggling to function that way. Yeah. Mentally and spiritually. So,
yeah, it really is.
Yeah. But yeah, so I mean, I just think these things were all over the place, and we see them and it's like, well, okay, so ships were in the ocean, fair enough. You need to know there's like a shoreline there in the middle of the night. So that works, but it would also work for a flying ship. A ship in the air. And so here is just an example of some of the images of, and if you go back and look sort of at I guess it would be the 17th century-ish, there's a lot of this kind of imagery. And it seems as if they were just, I don't know, just blasting the energy in every direction.
Yeah. It's interesting.
It's almost like they were playing with it. They were just like, look at what we can do.
Like fireworks, yeah.
Well, it does look like fireworks, but what's that other Fibonacci sequence that you were talking about?
Yeah.
It kind of looks like that a little bit.
Oh, yeah, a little bit.
Yeah. So just examples and just the brightness and, being out at night. I think it would actually have been pretty light outside with all of these lit up.
Right.
They had a different concept of lighting back then. It just seemed to be everywhere,
Interesting.
And then there was energy available in your home, free energy. So you had the antennas on top collecting the atmospheric energy, and you would have had these radiators in your living room or your bedrooms or wherever. And I think that's where the actual radiator came from. I know now, or at least in the past century, it probably meant more like a water-filled or steam-filled thing on your wall. But I think this was the original radiator.
Yeah, because they used actual radium, right, to get this done. Yeah. And so it's not far off to say that would probably be where that came from, because radium, that's what it does, is it radiates heat from the radium.
Yeah. And they've made us afraid of a lot of these things, like, sorry.
No, you're fine.
I was
Like
just checking what radium was because it's been a long time since I've been in school, and I did not. Full disclosure, I did not do great in my chemistry class.
Oh,
It was not my thing.
I'd have to look on the exact description of radium, but I do know that they have told us that. Well, we know it glows, right? We know it's like luminescent, and we know it gives off heat, so it collects atmospheric energy, and it will actually radiate heat. But they've made us very scared of these things because they don't want us to have free energy and that kind of stuff. So I've heard horror stories about radium and also mercury, right? So,
right.
You know, I'm sure there's ways to handle those with care, but it's probably more the fact they don't want us to have them. And some of the dichotomy around these contraptions is that I think they moved over to like actual burning, so, you know, wood fire and coal fire. But I think originally these fireplaces, or what they were called, chimneys, which I think is a French word, but they were actually made for clean, free energy. And I think that the chimney part of it was just like that venting. So you would have a radiant heat, but you would also have venting. So you wouldn't just like bake in your house. You know, it had that really nice air that would also come in. But I don't believe those were originally made for fire. So you can tell because the whole outer part is made with wood. And then there's and the picture above. So I just don't think you would put wood and a painting above like a burning heat, right? Just seems a little bit illogical.
Yeah, and there was a lot of those that were looked, you know, it looked like a fireplace that we would know as a fireplace nowadays, but it didn't have the same characteristics. It didn't have all of the same things that we would associate with a fireplace. Like you said, it was definitely used for something else.
Right.
Yeah, and just thinking logically, if you built a house with a fireplace, having never designed it before, let's just say you didn't inherit this design, but you were thinking logically, like, and you know it's going to be full of ash, and you know it's going to be full of like bits of wood and stuff. You would probably build a better design to actually trap that and have it kind of come out the other side or something. You know what I mean? Like you wouldn't have it in your house.
Right.
Yeah, so these are two, I think, energy collectors, and there's like a missing panel here, but I think the metal panel would have gone behind here and radiated the heat. Yeah, like this one.
Okay.
Yeah, they were clearly doing something different. They're not burning wood in there, that's for sure.
That's right. Yeah.
And it's just on the ground. If they were, let's just say they were burning wood, they're burning it right on the ground, right?
Yeah, let's just have a bonfire right in our front room.
Yeah. And what are these?
Like something my children would do.
And what are these? Yeah, exactly. What are these little orb-looking things that we've seen a couple times in there?
Yeah,
it's very interesting.
I think those are resonators, so they would be pulling the energy from. So your house is already pulling down, right? It's already collecting etheric and electrostatic energy, and I think these would have had possibly mercury in them.
Sure.
Yeah,
and so they're resonating and they're creating heat, and that would just radiate off this back panel here.
Yeah, we almost have to completely like rethink how to live. You know, it doesn't. There isn't only one way to do it. We've been told that there's only one way to do it, but there's obviously they were doing it differently. Like this picture showing here, it's obviously showing that people were using radium, or else they wouldn't have had these type of drawings.
Exactly, they're telling you right there what they've used, and and I don't see, like you say, I don't see why they would draw this if it wasn't actually a thing.
Right. Huh.
Yeah, and these old bricks, so the red bricks are the ones that have the iron element in them. And, if you go to Europe, you'll just see so many brick buildings. And again, I just think it was purposeful. There was always a purposeful design. So, it was functional. It wasn't just, oh, this looks really nice. We'll lay 1 million bricks. There would probably have been an easier way to do it, but bricks obviously had a functional purpose.
Yeah, I think we've proven today that there's easier, cost-effective ways to do it, but it doesn't give us the same, energy, and it doesn't give us the same outcome. So
exactly,
it's definitely not better.
Yeah. And now we have, lots of smoke, and that was just one of the things. So, as I've been studying this, I've learned that there was, ways to access atmospheric energy. There was ways to access, etheric energy through, things like radium and mercury and things like that. But there was also gas, free, clean natural gas. There's reservoirs everywhere. That hasn't actually stopped being available. But I think they want to get everyone dependent because they have to be able to control how we use it now, and so that they can maximize the profit.
Yep.
And that's one of the things that I just find really annoying.
Yeah, it's disgusting.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same thing in Oregon anyway. I don't know if it's like this up there, but you can't even collect rainwater around here.
I know.
I mean, it rains quite a bit here, so you would think that would be a good system for people, but it's illegal to capture rainwater.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah. And, you have to get all these permits for anything. So if you want to build a new house, you have to show them the design. You have to make sure it's all according to the building standards for that particular kind of thing. And so everything's really controlled, even these wind farms that they have, it probably costs more energy getting the materials to actually build the windmill, than it does to actually benefit anybody.
Yeah. And those things are barely putting out any energy, and they're just ugly. What are we doing? This is not weird. There's so many better ways, and I think we've proven that, in these episodes. There's so many better ways to pull energy, and they're just not letting us do that. And so I guess that leads me to who. I know a lot of people are like, who would do this? Who would get rid of all of this stuff, and why would it be hidden? And I think that always leads us to, well, it has to be something satanic, right? It has to be something demonic, because free energy for the people and free access to all of these different technologies, hiding that from the people would be very demonic. That would be a very satanic thing to do.
Well, and if you think of the structures being of God, what's the opposite of that? Of course, it's going to be Satan's going to be the one that wants to come in and destroy it, hide it. Yeah.
So I know you've talked at length on your show about all of the different things, possibilities that might have been. And I know you talk a lot about Satan's little season. And so who do you think kind of is the biggest proponent in covering all of this stuff up? Or do you think it was a kind of a global thing? Because I know a lot of people ask me, who's doing this? Who's burning all of this stuff down? Who's hiding it? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I want to lead into that actually with just, so the electrical energy, I think, caused cataclysm. So I think there would have been a big meltage. I've seen that. You probably see that. We're both on the West Coast. So I see a lot of meltage on this West Coast here. And we obviously see it in other areas of the world, like severe meltage where whole cities are just blended into rock. And, you can see evidence of it. There's scorching right on the waterfront here, pure black kind of lines of burn. And then personally, I see evidence that there were structures there as well. So on that note, I think that so just to recap, so I think that when Jesus said, "I come quickly," there are those standing here that, will not pass away before, the Olivet Discourse. So before all these things come to pass, including the desolation of the temple and sort of the end of that age, which was what we would recognize as the old temple system. And so you fast forward and you get to the Revelation, where John sort of prophesies and talks about all of the things that Jesus accomplished and what he's doing and what he would do. And, it's speaking to the point where Jesus actually keeps saying, "I come quickly." The time is at hand. This is happening now. And when you read through the New Testament, it's very much a theme that they are preparing for the end. And they are preparing for this sort of changing of the guard. So Jesus is taking over now, and the enemy is going to be, it even says the enemy will be crushed, or Satan will be crushed under your feet. So there's a lot of that language. And so if we consider that to have happened because we believe Jesus and what he said he would do, so he did that. And then you realize that what came after that, so the period right now I would call Satan's little season. Revelation 20 verses 7 and 8 talks about how Satan was bound for 1,000 years.
Right.
And so there was a time during the destruction, and through that, you might call it Armageddon, or, there's lots of words for it, but there would have been meltage, and there would have been severe heat and cataclysms, and we see evidence of that all over the world. So I think there was a lot of people that survived, but probably in small little segments. And it's possible that over the 1,000 years of Jesus' reign, I think there's evidence that there was always kind of this shadow that continued to exist, because it wasn't a sinless place. It was a place where Jesus was ruling with a rod of iron. It tells us that. And so his kingdom and his priests and the church was ruling. So I think there was always going to be this need for a rod of iron. If everyone's just good and they're all sinless and nobody's being bad, you don't need a rod of iron. But there was obviously a need for that, right? So
sure.
I think there was a contingent that survived. And I think, personally, it was the same group that had come out of Babylon. Probably a long line of the royal bloodline, because they still keep records of who they are. And I think it's the people that we can even identify as kind of these named elites that are sitting in positions of authority. And I would say that they belong to a certain bloodline that probably goes all the way back to the very beginning, probably Cain, right?
Yeah.
Sure.
And they developed a kind of priesthood within their own bloodline, and they've kept very close ties to the line of the woman, the seed of the woman, which is Jesus and the church. And that's why they run alongside, because they really want to deceive. They really want to be mistaken for the real thing. And that's why you get the Antichrist, and you get these pretenders and deceivers. So yeah, I think it's bloodline related. I think there's a 13 family kind of component to that. So 13 bloodlines rule the world, all serving Satan. And they, I think they've always been the kind of, they've always had allegiance to Satan.
Right.
I don't think that's ever changed. And then they just play pawns like chess with people who are just kind of being born outside of that system. And I think they're extremely power hungry, and they want to, well, we saw it with Nimrod, right? So the Tower of Babel, we saw this kind of contention for God's throne. And it seems so ridiculous to those of us who know that the Almighty God will never be moved from his position.
Right.
How can they even think they can do this, right? But I think they have this aspiration because they know they are doomed. I think they know that they are, it's they have nothing to lose almost. They know they're condemned. And they're working.
It's almost like when you're playing a chess game and you know that you've lost, but you you just are still playing, because both of you look at each other across the table and you realize that you've lost. You know that you've lost.
Yeah.
But you just keep messing around.
You go through the
moving the pieces around the table in such futility. It doesn't even matter because both of you know that you've lost. But they just keep playing the game. They're not going to stop playing the game, and they're going to continue to move their chess pieces for as long as possible. And I think this was a big thing that they did was, they knew about the loosing of Satan for a short time. We could speculate on why God wants to do that, why he's allowing that. What's the point? What's the goal? I don't really think that that's any of our business. I think our business is to just stay focused on the one true King. But obviously God was allowing this loosing of Satan for a reason, and during this time, which is a short time, it says a little season, he just began wreaking havoc and causing deception in so many different ways, because that's what it is, right? It's a season of deception. And what's more deceiving than to completely wipe out the existence of this millennial reign, just completely wipe it off the map. And I think when we start talking like this, I think a lot of people that are Christians and have been going to the church for a long time, they get very stuck to the doctrine of the rapture and the dispensationalism and all of those different things. Behind. Yes, and
franchise,
and it's very popular in the Christian church. But we always encourage people to dig into those doctrines, because where did they come from? Who was setting up these doctrines? Where did they originate from? What was the motive behind all of that? Because to me, if there is basically one way to see this eschatology, this end times, it doesn't make any sense to me. There is not one way, and a lot of people say that there's multiple ways. There's the pre-trib and the mid-trib and the post-trib. Well, that's all really still the same thing. It's all still going through the same dispensationalism talk, and also going through the same rapture talk, because that's what you're really saying, right? Is when is the rapture going to come, pre, mid, or post? But you have to ask yourself, is the rapture even a thing? Or is this a doctrine that came out of this period of deception? So we have to really be careful when we latch ourselves to these things, just because that's what we've always been told. We have to actually do our own research, look into people like John Darby and the Plymouth Brethren and all of those different things, because these are not good people, but this is where this stuff originated from. So I guess when I'll leave it to you to kind of go into what else comes to you on that. But do you feel that we're on the same page there?
Yeah, I was. Yeah, totally. What you said was right. And actually, just yesterday, I was looking at. I don't normally go to these websites, and I don't recommend anyone do. But there's the Lucis Trust website, which is basically the website, the organization. And if you think Lucis, Lucis, is actually short just for Lucifer, so Lucis. And it's Lucis Trust, and they fund a lot of the international kind of, what do you want to call it? Like, just, they campaign for, I would say just the occult, but they do it in a way that's kind of more like, oh, we're just networking, we're just trying to find our higher selves, and we're just trying to be better people. But really underneath that layer is a total demonic agenda. Right. And I was actually just getting the logo because I put a community post on yesterday. So I was taking the logo for that as part of my little post that I was doing. And I noticed there's a link, and it says the coming Christ or something like that. And I was like, oh, that's interesting, huh? So I just clicked into it to read through what they say. And basically, this is really important for Christians to know. The people that are ruling the world, they are preparing the way for a Christ figure. This is what it's all building up to. So all of these religions, all this coexist stuff, all of these, and again, like the dispensationalist, what I would call a heresy, is these are all building up to a futurist right? So like people are looking for Christ still to come in that way that because they've kind of wiped out the second temple thing. They've kind of wiped out the prophecies that already were fulfilled by the second temple and by the return to Jerusalem of that exiled Israel group. And, so they've wiped it out for a reason, and they have introduced futurism for a reason. And it's because the great deception, I think the final punch is going to be this false Christ, which people will actually buy into and probably deceive a lot of so-called Christians who are not tapped into the Holy Spirit, who aren't sensitive to the Holy Spirit, and who are just going along with what they're being fed through their favorite, TV preacher or whoever that might be.
Mega church.
Yeah. And Alice Bailey, who was the, I think was she the Thelemic, I can't remember the name of it, but the Thelema, she worked with she was like a predecessor to Aleister Crowley. They kind of had the same occult theories. And she called this Christ person, I do this because he's not the real Jesus, not the real Messiah. But she said that there will be a Christ, a Messiah who will come, and they call him the Great Teacher. And he will instruct the world, and he will be there as a representation of all religions. And that's why this whole New World Order is driving toward bringing everyone together. And I saw, what did I see? I saw something on Instagram earlier, and it was like 1 million Muslims accept Christ. And at first you're like, oh, that's wonderful. But now I'm thinking, which Christ are they accepting? Is it the real Christ, or is it some false teacher that they've, been misinformed about? So, speaking truth is way more important now than ever. It's always important, but I just feel like as things build up, I don't think we have a lot of time. That little season phrase is indicative that it's not our timeline, it's God's,
Yep.
It'd be great to just hang out here and have all the bad guys go away and just continue on and repair. But I think there is going to be a culmination where everything kind of rounds up, all the evil will be rounded up and dealt with. And and then if anyone wants to read the rest of that Revelation 20 and on from there, it actually is a beautiful future that we have. So it's definitely
a lot of hope.
Looking forward to. Yeah.
It really is. And that futurism also goes a lot with escapism too, where people just want to be taken away from all of the hardship and be removed from the earth when all of this stuff happens. And obviously that's why the rapture and stuff like that. But I just don't, I don't see that. I don't think that God removes his people. I have never seen that in the Bible where he removes his people. They are typically going through it. He might, he protects them through the storms, right? He didn't,
but they still have to wander in the wilderness.
Yeah. He didn't remove Noah and the other 7. They wrote it out, and I think a lot of Christians get really excited about the idea of being removed, and they don't have to worry about any of the hardship or dealing with other humans, for that matter. The evil human, the bad humans. We can completely separate ourselves from them, and that's just not Jesus's message either. So we have to be very careful when we think about the Bible and what Jesus was actually saying. Was he saying, "I'm coming soon"? I think so. Were there a lot of events that happened during that time right after he said that could be the events that Revelation is talking about? Yes, it's very clear that could be. And so all of this stuff that we're talking about for our audience isn't to necessarily say, we want you to believe this, because, that's not who we are. We want you to believe what you feel like believing, whatever the Holy Spirit's leading you to believe. We're just trying to present information, and all of the information, because we know there's a lot of stuff that the churches just aren't covering. They're not going to talk to you about dispensationalism or John Darby or all those things like we just did. They're not going to say that, because then that leaves them holding the bag for something that they have to explain. and it becomes very difficult for them. And so these are the things that we like to talk about, because we want the people that listen to us to be well informed of everything, not just the things that we like or the things that the church likes or whatever, so anyway.
Yeah. And I just think like so much of churchianity now, and I really liked that podcast on what is the church and just kind of reframing it in more of a biblical context. And, it's not the building. It's not, your tithes shouldn't be going to repairing the roof or something like that, and it's not a concert. You're not there to listen to someone on a stage and not interact and all of that. So I think, this time of great deception is just so blatant to me, especially when you realize the biblical cosmology that's been hidden from us, which includes everything else. That's kind of like the big can, like you open the can and all the worms come out, and that's just like, for me, that was it anyway. And then you see all the other stuff that is behind that. But so I think just the way that even just the big deception around the way that the church is meant to function and who we are as the church, I don't want to like slander my local church or anything, but at the same time, you just try and get involved. You try and be a good Christian. You want to do things, and you want to be someone who's contributing. And often you can just get knocked back. Like I'm sure other people can feel that as well. Like there's certain people that are in positions, and if you're not in that kind of like group at the church, you almost don't even get a chance to do anything, because it's all very tightly guarded, I would say, and controlled. And, certain people have the positions. So that also speaks to me of the Great Deception, these sort of structures of leadership, and it just follows that corporate kind of mindset. And
totally.
Yeah.
Well,
but the
awesome.
church is coming together, right? Because we're here.
It really is.
Look at this. Yes, exactly.
And that's what we try to help people understand, is the church isn't one thing. This is the church. Us coming together and talking like this. This is the church, and we edify each other, by having these conversations, but we also are putting it out on the internet for others to hear, so that they could be edified as well. We want people to have hope and joy and peace, and know that there's really not anything to fear, regardless of how we are, what our world's system is, all of those different things. There's really nothing to fear. Jesus always has us. It's just, how are we going to ride this out? Are we going to ride it out as true Christians that are showing love and compassion and all that? Or are we going to ride it out as whining little babies that, kicking and screaming and pointing and saying, this is all bad. We hate it. It's bad. It's like, it is. It's bad.
Yeah.
It's pretty bad right now. It's pretty dark out there. There's a lot of demonic stuff going on. But the fact that we recognize that, as a whole, people are beginning to wake up and recognize that there is a demonic force out there, and it is very clearly being followed by a lot of our politicians, by a lot of our people that we thought were celebrities, and people that we thought, were good people, and they're just not. And there's no reason to follow those people, and there's no reason to give them any time of day, because now that we know about them, we don't have to read about them on TMZ anymore, or on the news, or any of that. So we don't care.
Yeah.
We care about what the Bible says. We care about, our neighbors. We care about all of those things. And that's the freedom, right, that we have in Jesus, is to focus on our neighbors and not be distracted by all this other stuff. So anyway, this is a great conversation. Thank you so much for coming back on.
Thank you for having me. This is fun. I feel like we're family, so.
I know. We could talk for hours and hours and hours.
Yeah.
We really
do.
We do.
Yeah, and we have.
But no, I just want to say, like, my content is sort of focused around kind of just that hopeful thing, right? Like looking at, okay, this has happened and these are the people involved. But once you open your eyes, I think it's that opportunity for God to be glorified. And so you it actually breaks you a little bit, to be honest, which is a good thing. Like that's
right.
We're not here to stand on our own strength. We're here to rely on God. And so, I think this has been a good moment for the church where those of us who have the eyes to see, we're actually being humbled in a very good way, because we realize that the only one who can get us out of this mess is Jesus. And I just think just looking for his leading and following his Holy Spirit and just connecting with like minds like you and us and like a lot of the people on my channel, so many good subscribers that actually write to me, and we have great conversations. So it's actually a really positive thing.
Yeah, I agree.
Just building up the church. I love it.
Yes.
Building up our fringy family.
Yeah.
That's right. All right, you guys. Well, we appreciate you hanging in there and listening to this episode. We know that you've enjoyed it. We've enjoyed the conversation, and we hope to, and we know that we're going to speak with Madeline again soon. And we just hope that everything continues to go well for you on your channel and in your life.
Subscribe to Leaving Babylon on YouTube. It is so worth it. She's got a ton of knowledge. That's what, I mean, come on. She's got a ton. Yeah,
I mean, if a person is putting in this amount of work, you know, to get the information out there, it's worth giving them a subscribe and tuning into, because she doesn't have to do it. She doesn't have to do any of it, but she's doing it out of the kindness of her heart and the love that Jesus has put on her heart for you guys out there. So with that, we're going to say goodbye to our friend Madeline. We hope to talk soon. Say hi to Will for us.
Yes. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Nice
and for all of you out there, we'll talk to you again soon. You guys take care. Bye-bye now.
Bye.